Okay, now, having got the embouchure sorted out, the next thing to do was to get a good sound. So then Muriel, she introduced me to Zen and the Art of Flute Playing. I had to get this book by Marcel Moyse, you know, the one, De la Sonorité, which to me, I think it's a real pain if you ask me. But the basic laid down in that book is very, very profound, because you learn how to make a good sound, you learn how to be flexible with the sound, and you learn how to amplify the sound, that is to make a crescendo and a diminuendo. And armed with these three principles, you can play most music very, very well. So then Muriel, she told me, okay, put the flute in the head, put the head in the flute, so I did. And she said, you have to do this. And that I did, but I thought it's sort of boring. Well, it is, isn't it? When you consider, you know, watching TV or going to a football match or basketball or Michael Jordan, you know, it's sort of boring. But it depends what you want to do. And at that time, there was no television. We didn't own a television. And nobody in our neighborhood had a fridge, a refrigerator that is. We just went and bought what we needed for the day, consumed it, and started over again the next day with the same procedure. And it was interesting because we were forced in another direction to amuse ourselves. So naturally, everybody in the street wanted to be Frank Sinatra or Bing Crosby or something like that, you know. And I wanted to play the flute, but I wasn't sure who I wanted to play like. But I did have this record of John Amadio, who was an Australian flute player. And this guy, although he didn't have the sound that I thought would appeal to me, he certainly had a technique that was better, like dead flat better than anybody else around. This guy could play a chromatic scale that sounded like he was going like this. You know, it was amazing. And in fact, he made a recording where he plays all three flutes, piccolo flute and an alto flute, and somebody must have been standing there to give him this, because they couldn't stop the recording in those days. What you heard is what actually happened. And this guy was amazing. And of course, he played the last movement of the Mozart D major concerto on one side of a 78. Of course, there was a big chunk cut out because I had to get all the music on there. And this was my first flute sound. And then I heard Jeffrey Gilbert, and that was just, for me, it. That was where to play the flute. And I used to look every week like crazy to see if Jeffrey Gilbert was going to play on the radio. I'd go down the whole thing, take it all off and listen there, and hope that my dad wasn't going to come in and say we're listening to a football match. Because we only had one radio. And that influenced me towards a different sort of style. And then when I got to London, my teacher, John Francis at the Royal College of Music, he gave me a record of Marcel Moyse playing the Hungarian Fantasy. And I thought, this guy just got out. This is fantastic flute playing. And I listened to that every day of my life for about 4 or 5 years. I just thought it was so magical. And, you know, this is an interesting thing to do, because it's like if you want to practice being a Christian, you do read the Bible every day. You actually read it and you understand it, not just looking at the page, you see. So I listened to this thing, and this is what I wanted to do. This is how I wanted to sound and how I wanted to play. So this is the next thing you've got to do. You've got to get a record of somebody who you admire. And it doesn't matter who they are. It can be Pavarotti or me or anybody else. But get a record of somebody who's making more than a couple of million a year. because the other ones are not making it. You know what I mean? So don't get their records. I mean, I don't think I need to tell you this actually, do I? I mean, nobody's going to go and get a record of my brother playing the flute and think that's how it is, because he's a saxophone player and he's real good too. But what I'm saying is that in order to be good at something, you have to have an idol. Like if you're going to be a golfer, you could go for your man, what's his name, that young guy? Who? Tiger. Yeah, Tiger Woods. I mean, that guy dynamite, you know. And just to watch how he does it, you could get a good general idea of how to swing the club. Whereas if you watch me playing golf, you ain't ever going to make it. See? You see what I mean? So it's necessary to have somebody who is really very, very good at it. So you get the right picture. So you get the right idea, the right sound, the right intonation, the right everything. Now, as a result, my musical taste wandered off a little bit because I was playing Hungarian fantasy every day, and my teacher wanted me to play Bach sonatas. Well, you know, Bach sonatas are okay, but you know, I wanted to play like Marcel Moyes, and he wasn't playing Bach sonatas. So that was out the window. But now, to get back to the business of producing the tone, after I got fed up doing these tone exercises, and I actually met Marcel Moyes, I was on first name terms with him, which was very unusual. He told me one day, call me Marcel. It took me about a week before I could get up the courage to call him Marcel. Anyhow, it was through listening to him teach and listening to people sing that I got the idea to wander away from the long tones. So instead of doing the long tones, I did something else, because when you do long tones, as we know them, like this sort of business, you don't learn an awful lot because nothing happens to your embouchure. So I invented these sort of little exercises. The first one now has become famous, and it's up there on the internet and you can see it. It's this one here. You see, and this exercise forces you to move your embouchure to get the thing in tune. You see what I mean? Do you all have flutes with you? Get your flutes out. Get out the head joint first. We'll do a little bit on the head joint. While you're all doing that, has anybody got a question? Yeah. How many flutes do I own? Probably about maybe 23 or 4, something like that. That's flutes like this. But I have a whole slew of other things, you know, like wooden flutes, one-key flutes and stuff like that. Alto flutes, bass flutes. I mean, I have these alto flutes. I very rarely play them, but I take them along to my class in Switzerland, because we have a flute band there, so I give them all these alto flutes and bass flutes to play. And then we get help from Matthias Ziegler, who's a really good bass flute player. He comes and plays a concert with us, so it sounds good. Right, you got your head joints out there.